The house was never officially yours, my cousin said while handing me an eviction notice. I gathered evidence. On her wedding day, I did a speech. I'm 30. On my birthday, I was handed what I thought would be the most thoughtful gift. My family was gathered in my childhood home and everything seemed perfect, too perfect, I realize now. My mother handed me the fancy envelope, her eyes twinkled with what I mistook for joy. It was anxiety, perhaps even guilt, though she hid it well behind her practiced smile. Open it, sweetheart, she urged, her voice carrying a slight tremor that I should have recognized as a warning. This is something special. The envelope was heavy, expensive paper with my name written in my mother's elegant handwriting. The silver ribbon slipped through my fingers as I carefully untied it, not wanting to tear such beautiful packaging. If only I had known what darkness lurked inside that pristine envelope. When I pulled out the papers, my heart didn't just skip a beat, it seemed to stop altogether. An eviction notice. The legal jargon blurred before my eyes, but certain phrases stood out like neon signs. Vacate the premises, 30 days notice, legal action if necessary. The cold, institutional words sliced through the warmth of the celebration like a knife through butter. The room began to spin and the happy chatter around me faded into a dull roar. This wasn't just a birthday present. This was a calculated betrayal, orchestrated by the very people who were supposed to protect me. The timing wasn't coincidental, they'd chosen my birthday deliberately, perhaps thinking I wouldn't make a scene in front of everyone. The eviction notice trembled in my hands as I struggled to process what I was reading. This home, which I'd spent the last 5 years renovating with my own savings and sweat equity, was being pulled out from under me like a rug in some cruel magic trick. My eyes darted between the faces around me, searching for any sign of support or explanation. My mom, usually so quick to comfort me, couldn't even meet my gaze. She stared at her hands folded in her lap, twisting her wedding ring, a nervous habit I'd seen countless times before. My father maintained his stoic silence, the same expression he wore when delivering bad news to his clients at the law firm. Lauren, my cousin and supposedly one of my closest confidants, perched on the armrest of the couch like a vulture waiting to swoop. She'd always been the family's golden child, the successful real estate agent who could do no wrong. Now I understood why she'd been asking so many questions about the house lately, always under the guise of friendly interest. My brother Dennis stood by the fireplace, hands shoved deep in his pockets, looking everywhere but at me. We'd grown up in this house together, shared secrets in its corners, fought and made up under its roof. His betrayal cut deeper than I expected. What is this? The words came out as barely more than a whisper, though in the sudden silence of the room they might as well have been a shout. I turned to my mother, desperate for some explanation that would make sense of this nightmare. What's going on? She seemed to shrink under my gaze. Sweetheart, we've been trying to find the right time to tell you. The words trailed off into nothing, leaving the rest of her sentence hanging in the air like smoke. My voice cracked as I spoke again, rising with disbelief and hurt. Tell me what? That you're kicking me out of my own house, the house I've poured everything into. Everything meant exactly that, every spare dollar, every weekend, every ounce of energy I had. I'd replaced the ancient plumbing, updated the electrical system, restored the original hardwood floors. This house wasn't just a building, it was my dream made real. Lauren cleared her throat. Vivian, be reasonable, she said, using the same condescending tone she'd used when we were children and she was explaining why she should get her way. The house was never officially yours. The deed is still in your parents' names and they've decided it's time for a change. A change? The word echoed in my head like a mockery. They weren't just talking about a change, they were talking about erasing 5 years of my life, 5 years of work and dreams and plans. I trusted my parents when they suggested I move in and renovate rather than buy my own place. Invest in the family home, they'd said. Make it yours, they'd promised. I stared at Lauren, suddenly seeing through her designer outfit and perfect makeup to the calculating person beneath. What do you know about this? I demanded, my hands shaking with rage and betrayal. She smiled, that real estate agent smile, the one that never quite reached her eyes. I'm just trying to help the family make the best financial decision. She glanced at my parents, seeking approval she'd already secured. The market's hot right now and you've done such a lovely job with the renovations. The return on investment would be incredible. The pieces started falling into place. All those casual questions about my renovation choices, the sudden interest in my improvement projects, the frequent visits to check on the progress. She hadn't been showing familial interest. She'd been assessing the property's value. "You want to sell it," I said slowly. "You want to sell my home and you want me out." The reality of the situation hit me like a physical blow. This wasn't just about the house. This was about profit, about taking advantage of my hard work for their financial gain. Lauren straightened, adjusting her designer skirt with manicured fingers. "The market's good, Vivian. It's a sound investment decision." She spoke as if we were discussing stocks or bonds, not the place I called home, not the dreams I'd built board by board, wall by wall. The manipulation became clearer with each passing moment. They'd let me pour my money and time into the house, knowing all along they planned to sell it. They'd encouraged my improvements while secretly plotting to profit from them. Every supportive comment, every word of encouragement had been part of their plan. My brother finally spoke. "Maybe we should discuss this privately," he suggested. I could see the guilt in his eyes. He'd known about this probably for months and had said nothing. I stood up, the eviction notice crumpling in my clenched fists. "No, we're talking about this now," I insisted, my voice stronger than I felt. "Why are you doing this? Why are you doing this to me?" The questions encompassed more than just the eviction. They were about the betrayal, the manipulation, the casual destruction of my dreams. My father finally broke his silence, his voice carrying the same tone he used in court, cold, distant, matter of fact. "There have been concerns about your ability to maintain the property properly," he stated, each word calculated to diminish my efforts. "Lauren showed us some concerning documentation." The room seemed to tilt sideways as I processed his words. "Documentation?" I repeated, my voice cracking. "What documentation? I've done everything right. I've followed every regulation, every rule." I turned to my best friend Paisley, who had been watching the scene unfold with growing horror from her position in the corner. "Paisley, tell them I've done everything by the book." Paisley stepped forward, her face fierce with loyalty. "Vivian has done everything perfectly," she declared. "I've seen all the permits, everything. She's improved this house in ways you can't even imagine." But her words fell on deaf ears. My family's faces remained impassive, unmoved by the truth. "Sweetie," my mother said, reaching for my hand with what seemed like genuine concern but felt like another manipulation. "You have 30 days to leave." The words were soft but final, a death sentence for my dreams wrapped in maternal concern. I jerked my hand away from her reach, feeling betrayed by even this simple gesture of false comfort. 30 days, I repeated, my voice growing louder with each word. "You want me out of my house on my birthday? 30 days to leave everything I've built." The silence that followed was deafening. Looking around the room at these familiar faces, I saw them clearly for perhaps the first time. My mother hiding her guilt behind concern. My father treating my home like a business transaction. Lauren already mentally calculating her commission. Dennis, unable to stand up for his sister against the family's schemes. They had all played their parts in this betrayal, each one contributing to the destruction of not just my home but my faith in family itself. The worst part wasn't just the eviction. It was the realization that this had been planned for months, maybe even years. Every family dinner where they'd praised my renovation choices, every time they'd encouraged me to invest more money in improvements, every seemingly supportive comment had been part of their long game. They had watched me pour my heart, soul, and savings into this house while knowing they planned to sell it out from under me. But the determination inside me began to rise. I would not let them take my home. I would not let Lauren win. Update 1. The morning after my disastrous birthday, I sat at my kitchen counter, staring numbly at my phone. 17 missed calls from Mom, 5 from Dennis, 3 from Dad, none from Lauren. Of course, she'd already played her part in this elaborate deception. The morning light streaming through my carefully restored Victorian windows felt harsh and accusatory, illuminating a home that apparently was never truly mine. Paisley, who had stayed the night on my couch like we used to do in college, tried to coax me into eating some toast. The mere sight of food made my stomach turn. All I could focus on was the mounting evidence of betrayal on my phone's screen, each missed call a reminder of the previous night's ambush. I grabbed my phone and dialed my mother's number, the anger that had been simmering all night finally bubbling to the surface. "I'm calling her," I announced, my voice tight with determination. My mother's rushed answer and immediate expressions of concern only fueled my anger. When she began explaining Lauren's supposed documentation of unauthorized construction and neighborhood complaints, my blood ran cold. The impossibility of her claims struck me hard. I had every permit, every approval meticulously filed away. My mother's stammering admission that she hadn't actually seen the complaints herself, that Lauren had handled everything, confirmed my worst suspicions. The manipulation ran deeper than I'd imagined. Through her vague responses and guilty pauses, it became clear that no one had bothered to verify Lauren's claims before orchestrating my birthday ambush. The days that followed transformed into an exhaustive investigation. My first stop was the building department, where Maria, the clerk who had helped me file all my permits, provided crucial information. Lauren had indeed been there the previous week, claiming to be my real estate agent and requesting copies of all my documentation. Maria's revelation that everything was in perfect order, coupled with her provision of a complete file of my thoroughly documented renovations, gave me my first piece of concrete evidence against Lauren's lies. The neighborhood association proved equally illuminating. Far from having complaints about my property, they had recently voted to feature my house in the holiday home tour. I collected written statements from contractors confirming all work had been done to code, and gathered testimonials from neighbors about the positive impact of my renovations on the neighborhood. My suspicions grew stronger with each conversation. I called my contractors, all of whom provided written statements confirming that all work had been done to code and properly permitted. I even tracked down my neighbors, collecting signed statements about the positive impact my renovations had had on the neighborhood. When I confronted Dennis at his office, he finally cracked under the weight of his guilt. He'd learned of the plan just before my birthday, sworn to secrecy by our parents based on Lauren's supposed evidence of my troubles. But more importantly, he'd overheard discussions about development opportunities in the neighborhood. His revelation about Lauren's fiancé and his family's luxury condo development company illuminated the true scope of the conspiracy. The pieces began falling into place with devastating clarity. My house, sitting on the largest lot in the neighborhood, wasn't just a target for family manipulation. It was part of a larger scheme to demolish the entire street for development. Through careful investigation, I uncovered a trail of emails, development plans, and systematic property acquisitions that painted a picture of calculated destruction. Lauren's deception ran deep. She had created fake email accounts to submit non-existent complaints to the neighborhood association. She had doctored building inspection reports, fabricating violations that never existed. She had even manipulated photos of my house, transforming routine maintenance issues into apparent structural problems. But for each of her forgeries, I had authentic documentation. For every false complaint, I had genuine praise from neighbors and contractors. For every lie she had fed my parents, I had irrefutable evidence of the truth. The scope of the betrayal extended far beyond my personal situation. Through meticulous research and conversations with other homeowners, I discovered a pattern of systematic property acquisition across the city. Lauren had been working as an agent for her fiancé's development company all along, using her position as a trusted family member to manipulate situations in their favor. She had employed similar tactics in other historic neighborhoods, leaving destroyed communities in her wake. The final piece of evidence arrived unexpectedly from my mother, whose guilt finally overwhelmed her loyalty to Lauren. The email chain she forwarded between Lauren and her fiancé's company laid bare their plans to replace our historic homes with luxury condos, complete with details of Lauren's substantial commission structure for each property she helped acquire. What had begun as a fight to save my home had evolved into something far more significant. The evidence I'd gathered exposed not just a family betrayal, but a calculated scheme threatening to destroy an entire community's history and character. The battle ahead would require more than just proving my competence as a homeowner. It would mean standing against the systematic destruction of our neighborhood's heritage. Update 2. I had gathered everything I needed. 3 months of meticulous investigation condensed into a single manila envelope. Each document inside was carefully organized, the genuine permits alongside Lauren's forgeries, the real inspection reports next to her doctored versions, emails exposing the development scheme, and sworn statements from contractors and neighbors. The evidence was irrefutable. I chose Lauren's wedding deliberately. Her moment of triumph would become her undoing. I waited until the minister asked if anyone had reason why these two should not be joined in marriage. The traditional question hung in the air for a moment before I stood, my heart pounding but my voice steady. The rustling of my movement drew all eyes to me, including Lauren's, whose perfect smile faltered for just a moment. I have evidence of fraud, conspiracy, and criminal misconduct, I announced, my voice carrying through the church's perfect acoustics. The gasps from the assembled guests echoed off the vaulted ceiling. Lauren's face transformed from confusion to rage as I approached the altar, manila envelope in hand. I began methodically laying out the evidence, using the church's podium like a prosecutor's lectern. First came the forged building permits, Lauren's clumsy attempts to create violations where none existed. I projected the documents on the church's presentation screen, showing the original permits beside her forgeries. The differences were obvious even to untrained eyes. Next came the fake neighborhood complaints, each one traced back to email accounts Lauren had created. I revealed how she had manipulated photos of my house using basic editing software to make routine maintenance look like structural damage. The murmurs in the crowd grew louder with each revelation. But the real bombshell came when I displayed the email chain between Lauren and her fiancé's development company. Their plans to demolish not just my house but the entire historic neighborhood were laid bare. The emails detailed their strategy, using false complaints and manufactured violations to force homeowners to sell at below-market prices, then flip the properties for massive profits through luxury condo development. My parents sat in the front row, their faces transitioning from embarrassment to shock to horror as the scope of Lauren's deception became clear. My mother covered her mouth with her hand when I revealed how Lauren had played on their parental concerns, manipulating them into becoming unwitting accomplices in her scheme. Her fiancé, standing at the altar in his expensive tuxedo, began to shift uncomfortably as I exposed their business dealings. His family's pattern of destroying historic neighborhoods for profit was now public knowledge, their tactics exposed for all to see. The prestigious guests he'd invited, potential investors and business partners, were witnessing the unveiling of their entire operation. She tried to interrupt, to dismiss my claims as the ravings of a jealous cousin, but I had anticipated this. I called forward 3 representatives from the city's building department, who confirmed the authenticity of my permits and the fraudulent nature of Lauren's documents. The neighborhood association president spoke next, verifying that no legitimate complaints had ever been filed against my property. The final blow came from an unexpected source. Her fiancé's business partner, apparently unaware of the illegal tactics being employed, stood up from his pew and publicly withdrew from their development project. This triggered a cascade of whispered conversations among the other business associates present, each one recognizing the legal liability they'd nearly entangled themselves in. The wedding dissolved into chaos. Her fiancé, realizing the potential damage to his family's business, immediately distanced himself from Lauren. He didn't just call off the wedding. He denounced any knowledge of her illegal activities, claiming she had acted independently. His swift betrayal was perhaps the most fitting punishment for Lauren's own treachery. The legal aftermath was swift and comprehensive. I filed charges against Lauren for fraud, forgery, and conspiracy. The district attorney's office, presented with my carefully compiled evidence, pursued the case aggressively. Lauren's real estate license was suspended pending investigation, and several of her previous development deals came under scrutiny. My family struggled to rebuild trust after their role in Lauren's plans. My parents, consumed by guilt over their willingness to believe her lies, worked to make amends. They legally transferred the house deed to my name and helped establish a neighborhood preservation fund to protect other historic homes from similar schemes. 6 months after the wedding I received word that Lauren had pleaded guilty to multiple charges of fraud and conspiracy. The plea deal required her to make restitution to various victims of her schemes, effectively wiping out her savings and investments. She was sentenced to 18 months in prison, with additional time suspended pending her cooperation with ongoing investigations into other fraudulent development deals. The experience taught me invaluable lessons about family, trust, and the importance of standing up for what's right. Blood ties don't guarantee loyalty, and sometimes the greatest betrayals come from those closest to us. But it also showed me that truth, backed by careful documentation and unwavering determination, can triumph over even the most elaborate deceptions. My home remained mine, more truly mine than ever before. The rooms that I had lovingly restored now held new memories, not just of renovation and renewal, but of victory over those who would have destroyed it for profit. Each creaking floorboard and restored window became a testament to perseverance, a reminder that some things are worth fighting for, no matter the cost.